Don't get your neck chopped in there. Next jaw's
That was
moving.
miles louder than I thought it would be.
I know, watch your fingers.
I've just gone deaf. I always thought these were slate. Did they used to be? They didn't used
What
to be.
are you saying? It's made of plastic?
Yeah.
Clearly it's made of slate.
Maybe not slate. They were definitely black, weren't they, once upon a time? I'm sure.
Yeah. Hello everyone and welcome back to Lights Camera Conversation. I'm Lottie and this week I am joined by Matt Haigh, copywriter extraordinaire. Matt, welcome to our humble abode.
Thank you for having me.
So what's your speciality then in terms of copy and writing? Do you have a particular area that you love writing about, or...?
Not in terms of sector. I definitely have a sort of sweet spot where I tend to work best, which is those sorts of areas of industry where the individual or the business know exactly what they are, who they are, what they do, what their offering is, who their audience is, but they don't necessarily know the best way to communicate that. And then I sort of act as that conduit if I can, getting the easiest, I say easy, but it's because I've been doing it nearly 20 years, but if you can get what's in someone's head onto a web page, onto a poster, onto the side of a van, whatever it is, in front of the right audience, that will then make those people pick up a phone, download a PDF, whatever it is, retweet something, then that's what I tend to do. So it's like anything, the better the ingredients, the better the brief, the better the output.
Did you always know that you wanted to sort of write? Did you sort of start out in that, or is it something that you've just sort of fallen into?
No, it's laziness, pure laziness. At school, the only thing I never had to work at was English. Everything I had to learn languages, I had to learn science, English was just easy. So you end up doing English language at A-level, English language at uni, fall into trade journalism, and then it just basically trundled on from there.
So where are you at now in terms of your career? Because obviously, I guess you've done different things and you're sort of in a place where you're freelancing now. Because obviously you do quite a lot of work with us on scripts and different bits of writing. But what sort of projects are you kind of working on? Where have you got to after, 20 years of writing?
It's interesting. I would say in the last, probably not even 10 years, maybe the last 5 to 8 years, probably just started taking off pre-COVID. A lot more video, a lot more working with people like you, where I think because everyone's a cameraman now, aren't they? Everyone thinks they've got it in their pocket so they can make videos. And then once they've had a go at it themselves, they realise they understand the power of it and the reach it can generate and the visibility of video, but maybe they need some external help from the professionals like you guys. So I think the requirement for my services has sort of gone up in parallel with the need for video, because for video you need scripts, treatments, storyboards, that sort of thing. So yeah, I work with a few video companies or a few in-house teams where they'll say, we know what we want to do, we just need the script tweaking slightly. So a lot of video at the moment. There's always blog posts going on, social campaigns, things like that. Still traditional PR as well. I mean, I cut my teeth just writing hundreds and hundreds of press releases for office chair companies, filing cabinet companies, things like that. But that's still a medium that people take notice of. It's more digital now, so you're not going to see as many in a physical magazine. But getting on these websites, it's still a route into those is still press releases a lot of the time.
Would you say that's where, what sort of trends are you spotting in terms of copy? Just in terms of, is there anything in terms of obviously we talked about doing more video scripts, so that's kind of the output, isn't it, the medium, but are you finding it for any types of sectors, any types of specific types of content where copy is becoming more popular?
I think B2B often sort of catches up with B2C.
Yeah.
So you tend to see, product descriptions, things like that, where people are using AI and large language model stuff to automate a lot of tasks. You might see that in e-commerce a lot more. So they'll want copywriters who've maybe got experience of prompt generation, working with Python, that sort of stuff. B2B tends to catch up a bit later because it's maybe not as quick a turnaround. I mean, obviously, if you're making engineering parts for cars and planes and stuff, then there's obviously that same, but they will have in-house teams that do all that sort of stuff anyway. But as a as a freelance copywriter, you tend to see that the B2B side catches up with the B2C side because typically they get their other things in line first, their IT, the logistics, their overheads, all that stuff, the premises, and then they go, oh, what about our marketing? So yeah, trend-wise, you're starting to see AI come in a little bit. Do
you think that's, I mean, what are your thoughts on it?
Well,
love it, hate it? Do you feel threatened by it or not? I mean,
it's just another part of the toolkit. I mean, you know, you might as well say, oh, and this did happen. You know, I when I qualified as a journalist, I never actually worked as a journalist. So I got the qualification post-grad, but then realised that for me to work in traditional sort of print journalism, I was going to have to go down to London and do a 12 grand a year internship somewhere, sleeping on someone's floor for years and hope to get a bite at a magazine, which, you know, all those magazines I would have wanted to work for have gone bust now anyway, or at best they're online. So I realised there was a pivot to move towards, you know, online, get my head around things like SEO, that sort of stuff. But there were a lot of people that didn't, you know, and they 5 years later then the boat had moved. So AI is the same sort of thing. It's another tool. You can hold it by the handle or the blade. I mean, to act like it's going to replace everyone is a bit melodramatic. AI is a bit of a misnomer. You know, it's not like the Terminator that's suddenly going to usurp humans. It's any sort of large language model is only as good as what it gets fed anyway. So, and all that has been written by other people. Ultimately, if you replace all these writers with computers, then it's just diminishing returns because it's computers telling other computers about something that a computer wrote about, and there'll be no distinction. You know, that sort of USP where you differentiate your product or service has to come from at the moment anyway, has to come from some sort of human insight, because that's what happens. You notice a thing and you go, oh, that's what makes us good. That's what our audience wants to see, you know. And even if you write that down and put that online, that is still all you're doing is feeding an AI, so to speak. So yeah, it's not something I'm worried about. I've certainly not seen less work since the dawn of it. Plus, there's going to be a big. If you think about certainly younger businesses and maybe entrepreneurs that are starting out now who might be a bit more concerned with things like social responsibility and sustainability, there's actually quite a lot of arguments against the use of AI, just because of, you know, you have server farms in parts of America that need as much fresh water to cool them as you would use for a small town. So there might be a backlash. You know, I might end up copywriting in a post-apocalyptic world where you just got a bit of bark and some charcoal. Well,
this is it. You've probably not read the book I've read, but
have you read a doom-mongering one that says we're all going to get replaced?
Well, I chatted a bit about it in my last podcast, so I won't go on about it, but it's called Scary Smart. It's a book by a guy called Mo Gaudat, who is the chief executive officer of Google X. So it's his take on it. To be fair, I'm sort of reaching the end of it now, and it feels like there's hope on the horizon, but the first 5 chapters are just terrifying kind of stuff. But it is interesting, I think, as you say, using it as a tool, and certainly, you know, we use it. And I think with regards to copy, you can't, there are certain types, you know, particularly with video scripts. Yes, it's one thing doing a very systematic health and safety type video, or something that is very bit by bit by bit, that's kind of the similar site kind of content. And then over here you've got something that is much more clearly, it's got to have a certain type of tone, it's got to have a cultural piece. I mean, obviously the script that you wrote for us, our script, you know, it's a highly creative script, isn't it, for our next ad that we're looking at doing. And that kind of stuff is where you really have to sort of sit and take time to get to know the business, the people, the culture, interview them in depth, and then pull out all of those little kind of golden nuggets and facets that make that content, you know, into the overall picture. And that's very much a skill set. So, you know, AI is I think is good and can be used as a tool, certainly for copy, and it can speed certain types of things up. But then there's other things where you need to go more creative and deeper, and that's where, you know, you need human ability. I mean, how do you keep your content creative? How do you stay creative? Because ideas it's sort of interesting, isn't it, how different people get ideas and why they get ideas, and do you put yourself in a frame of mind to do you have a long shower before you have to write a script to get all your ideas, or do you just sort of sit in the room and there they are? How do you get your ideas?
I'm always running too late to have long showers. Man have to be very quick. I'm sure you guys know this as well, working in film. I think the more you immerse yourself in the stuff that you do, the more it inspires you. So if I've always said, I'm by far from being the first person to say it, you're not going to be any good at writing if you're not reading. So I'm always reading, whether it's stuff that's related to what I work in, or whether it's novels, or whether it's something written under a QR code, whatever it is. There's always something. You'll see little lines on the back of a innocent smoothie bottle a few years ago where they got quite creative with their copy, and then everyone followed suit. And it's I think you can't have any sort of inspiration or stay relevant in a vacuum. So it must be the same for you guys. You must always be looking at films, whether it's for pleasure in your own time, or whether you're looking at competitors' films, or maybe not even competitors, but just other businesses that have done something interesting with video. And I think once you stop sort of looking for that sort of thing and immersing yourself in that sort of thing, you're probably going to dry up creatively pretty quickly.
What about a change of scene? Because I find if you can try and get out somewhere, even just going on a walk or doing something that takes you out of the everyday, the mundane. I mean, we've started doing these sort of team away days. So every 6 months, we'll go and do something. So we're off to go ape in a couple of weeks to do some...
Are you all having the GoPros on your head?
Yeah, probably. I mean, obviously we film everything, right? So we'll probably film a skit whilst we're there and, do other bits and pieces. But it's trying to sort of get out of the everyday and then, come together as a collaborative. And then, we can use that to sort of shape ideas, whether it's ideas for projects, whether it's ideas for the business, where we can kind of really get into that kind of creative rhythm. I mean, do you do anything like that where you sort of take yourself off somewhere, or...
Maybe not along those lines in terms of, because obviously I don't have the team bonding element with what I do, but what I do like to do sometimes, if I'm going visiting a client or something like that, I'll ask, if I'm there for, let's say, 2 p.m, I'll say, right, once we've had whatever meeting it is, do you mind if I just steal a corner of a desk or something and just plug into your Wi-Fi and just almost listen to it, and hear different rhythms of a different workplace and how people interact, and you might learn something about a client that you're not going to learn from their official, presentation where everyone's got their best smiles on and stuff. But I think in terms of getting away from the desk completely, then yeah, I think like anyone, if you go and just get your head off a screen, walk somewhere a bit greener, go and play football, something like that.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting idea. I like that. As sort of almost like observational, just sort of listening in, as you say, to the kind of the rhythm of the business.
Yeah, and not in a sort of voyeuristic way though. It's just you don't like try and hide or anything.
No,
but it's just you do
like
you plug into
it?
the everyday, and you just notice those different nuances where they do this here, and they're interested in that sort of thing, and they treat their clients this way as opposed to, and it's. You just learn sort of different things and just be a bit of a magpie and take it all away with you.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, we sometimes will have clients come in and work out of here, in the opposite way, which is quite nice because again, they're just sort of sitting and being and observing. We had a client yesterday who was in with us, for the most of the day and sat with Tom, and they did a bit of editing together. We had a bit of a meeting, had a bit of lunch, and it's just a nice way, I guess, to get to know, newer clients and for them to get to know you. And then, as you say, there are things that always come out of that in terms of, potential projects or creativity or, thoughts around different things that then go down different streams. So. And
you'll learn something about a brief as well. The number of times I've been to see a client, they've said, here's what we want, and you have the presentation, the sit down, the meeting, they tell you all about it, and then afterwards when everyone sort of exhales and relaxes, and you'll just offhand over a brew say something, so what was wrong with the last thing you did? And they'll go, well, because this happened, that happened, and you think that's the reason, not all that you've just told me. And if you hadn't asked that question or just had that casual conversation throughout the course of the day, you'd have missed that and not been able to add it to your brief and then let it inform what your outputs were as well.
What's been one of the best projects you've worked on in terms of like something that's either really stretched you or it's been super unique or just really exciting to work on? Is there anything that, you know, out of the 20 years that you've been writing really sort of stands out?
I say 20 years. That maybe it's closer to like 17. Just
we'll round it up
to keep me under 50.
What's 3 years between friends?
Well, I mean, ironically, the best work I ever did, the work I was most proud of, never actually ran. It was a recruitment campaign for a global business, massive business, but one you've never heard of. You know, these people that unless you're in that sector, you don't know they exist, but they are literally like multi-billion pound with over 100 territories, and they wanted to attract like the best talent. They called it disruptive talent. I think it was Richard Branson or someone came up with this, but it was basically, how do we get these people that are like Goodwill Hunting type people to come and join our business instead of joining the MOD or, you know, the PricewaterhouseCoopers or Ernst & Young sort of thing. So I wrote what I humbly thought was a brilliant recruitment campaign of them, 6 different iterations of it, worked with a designer as well, so they're sort of scamping it up alongside as I'm writing it. And the client didn't go for it, and I thought it was great, but there's a famous copywriter called Dave Trott who was sort of massive in the 70s and 80s, and he says, if it didn't run, it's not work. So I thought it was my best work, but it wasn't work technically, so it's all it is a good draft. So in terms of projects that I worked on that I was actually sort of proud of and interested in, I worked with Manchester City Council when they had the centenary commemoration of the Battle of the Somme. So I think it was 2016-ish, so I'm not very good at history, but it was to mark 100 years since basically all these people got sent over the tops to their death. Effectively, it was like there's 100,000 or so people died in a matter of a few hours, and there was a big commemoration of that. So it was the national commemoration, but it was held at Heaton Park in Manchester. There was hundreds of volunteers coordinated. There was all sorts of different educational projects, schools outreach, tons of social media, tons of historical reenactments, also all these different threads to be sort of pulled together. But because it was so close to people's hearts, even though it was 100 years previous, it was really sort of to see the end result on the day and then the subsequent weeks afterwards and all the coverage and everything. It was really good to work on that.
Yeah, I think, you know, anything that's where you can combine, you know, the writing to emotion, where there's that emotional link, it sort of makes for some of the best stuff, really, I guess, that you know see in terms of those sorts of things. I mean, how important do you think sort of getting emotion into copy is, you know, particularly for businesses? Because obviously there's one thing is that they're doing something like that, and then there's another thing, you know, doing stuff for sort of that's kind of consumer related, but you know, you're talking about B2B kind of catching up. You know, how important do you think it is for companies to sort of show their emotional side or allow that to kind of play out within the type of content that they create?
I think in a lot of cases it's hugely important. I mean, that emotion that you mentioned, yeah, it might not be something that stirs you initially as a creative, but if you talk to the founder of these businesses, or in some cases it'll be like the third generation of that business whose granddad started it in the 40s or something, you'll get the emotional weight just from asking the right questions and, you know, being shown the people who've worked there for donkey's years and, you know, the customers that keep coming back. And it's like I said earlier, my job is really just to get that into a different medium rather than tinkering with it so much. If the ingredients are there and the brief is good enough, the writing side of it almost does itself, really. It's not the hardest thing to sell is something that isn't up to speed anyway. You know, if it's a poor product or a poor service, or there's no authenticity to it, that's the hardest thing to write about. So that's what you would get your AI to do. You know, product descriptions on Temu or something like that. There's a piece of software that'll do that. Or, oh, you've locked yourself out of your account, here's how to reset your password. You get a video AI to do that for you. But in terms of brand storytelling, I think the emotion comes from the people usually, even if it's not something that's immediately emotive as soon as you see it.
You talked earlier about getting inspiration from, reading and doing lots of reading. Is there anything that you reading at the moment specifically?
Yeah, I've got. I'm reading the Casebook of Sherlock Holmes, which my dad had on the bookshelf when I was little, and then I think my mum gave it away after he died to a charity shop or something. And then when I was in Haigh on Wye, which is basically a town full of bookshops, last year, I saw it on the wall, and I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure it's the one my dad had because it had sun damage from, like when something's just been in the window for so long, and the silhouette over it is the exact same. So even if I'm wrong, I'm telling myself that I've bought the book that was on the shelf when I was little at my dad's. So yeah, reading that, trying to convince myself that I'd be a brilliant detective. I was just born in the wrong era. Rereading Dave Trott's stuff as well, rereading a lot of Anne Handley as well. She's an American copywriter who's very, very good. She just looks like a little old grandma, but she's one of those who's wrote the book on it literally. So yeah, and yeah, that's probably it. Oh, reading a book about British songwriters as well. So it's some guy who's interviewed all these people from sort of John Lydon and Mick Jones out of the Clash all the way up to sort of Noel Gallagher and Lily Allen and people like that, but yeah, I've always got my nose in something.
And is it more factual stuff that you prefer over fiction, or
no,
a bit of both?
Yeah, a bit of both. At work, are we allowed to swear?
Do what you want.
Okay. At work, I'm reading Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit, which is a brilliant... I've read it 2 or 3 times before, but it's good to refresh yourself every few years. I can't remember the guy's name.
There's a few of those, isn't there? Because there's a subtle art of not giving a fuck as well.
Yeah. Well, this is
like a phase of them that came out.
Yeah, well, I think that the subtle art of not giving a fuck is like a self-help thing, isn't it? Sort of empowering thing. Nobody Wants to Read Your Shit is purely about copywriting, and it's basically showing you how to get over yourself. You're not an artist. You're not. Yeah. You're not Dickens. It's about basically stealing some space in a customer's attention when they've got 1,000 messages a day to compete with it. So yeah, I try and balance it between the stuff that'll help me out at work and stuff that I just read for escapism. But I probably should read more. Everyone should probably read more, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I read. I mean, I do read as in read books, but I tend to do more of the audio stuff because obviously for me it's sort of, plugging in if you're doing the dishes or you're doing this or I'm generally having to do all the jobs around, so I can't really sit and have dedicated time with a book unless it's sort of in the evening at night, and then by that point I'll sort of do 2 or 3 pages and I'm like I'm gone. Like I'm done. So
see, if I had a real job like you where I actually had to move equipment around and carry stuff and walk here and there, and I had kids as well, I would definitely be on the exact same page. I think the reason why I can still do it is because I'm largely just sat around all day anyway.
But largely, I guess it doesn't really matter, does it, whether you're physically reading it or you're kind of listening to it. I guess the base of all of it is learning, as you say, for sort of inspiration. And, personally, I prefer to have stuff that is more factual. I don't deal with fictional stuff at all in the book world because I'm like, we've got movies for that, and that's my thing.
Well, that's the quote. I'll wait for the film to come out. That's what. That's what everyone
so
always
it's kind of
says.
like, well, what's the point? So I sort of will do the audibles and all of that jazz just to kind of learn and fill yourself up really with more information, and then obviously you can then kind of use that whether it's in work or your personal life or whatever it is that you're doing. I think it's always key to kind of keep learning because it helps you ultimately grow, doesn't it, as a person, and be able to kind of contribute more, which is a key thing.
I think the reason why I like and it's similar with working with videographers like you as well. If I read something that might end up as a film or something, or might end up on telly, it's interesting to read it because you always got to form a picture in your head, and you'll hear someone's voice, even if you've not got an audiobook in your mind. And then when that does get realised in a sort of visual medium, it's always interesting to see how far it is away from what you would have done it yourself. And that's the same as working on video scripts and treatments and storyboards, all that sort of thing, where you'll have an idea written down and then you're not involved after that, and then it's, you know, talented people who are making the film and, you know, putting all the things together and editing it, and then you watch it back and you go, wow, I would never have thought of that, or that, you know, that's miles away from what I thought, but in a good way, because it's that different kind of creativity where it's a bit more applied, you know, like you say, the scope for sort of just making it up and out of thin air is, it can be a bit limiting almost sometimes, because it's too much of a blank canvas. Whereas if you're making a film, you know what locations you can use, what personnel you can use, how long you've got to do it. So you're operating within a creative framework that sort of allows you to be a bit more creative, because it's not so nebulous, if you like.
So obviously, I mean, we've talked a bit about films and scripts and that sort of thing, and we're surrounded in our meeting room with different movies, so I don't think we can finish before I ask you what your favourite film is and why. And is it from a copy, you know, do you like the dramas where they get into the characters because that feels like a writing thing, or are you kind of blown away by all the marvels and the CGI and the special effects? Like, what do you enjoy?
No, but I think most of the best writing in my opinion, that I've seen in films is where they don't overwrite it, where they almost get out of the way and let the actors and the directors do it. So if you look at, like, you know, you Shane Meadows type films where, or even like Scorsese type stuff, well, there'll be a framework of what they want to happen in the scene, but if there's some improvisation or some workshopping that comes up with something better, I prefer that as opposed to the overwritten type of stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with these sorts of films, but, you know, like, say, a Guy Ritchie film where every last line is the script, do the script like this. And I suppose Tarantino has a bit of that to some extent as well, but I almost think the writing should get out of the way. It should be used to move the plot along, but I don't know, if you're a decent enough actor, you should be able to come up with decent enough dialogue, and you're reacting with the other actors as well. So if that happens organically, I think I like that sort of thing a bit more, maybe. So yeah, I don't look for writing in films that I like, if that makes sense. Certainly not dialogue, anyway.
Have you got a favourite film? You got anything that stands out for you?
I don't know. I've seen, just over your shoulder, I've seen The Godfather millions of times, like, you know, like anyone has, I suppose. But I think the thing with that is you always see something new each time, don't you?
It is a classic, isn't it?
Yeah, you always learn a bit more about it. And I have a big black hole in the 80s where I didn't watch any films, basically because we didn't have a video player. So because of that, we were never going to Blockbuster and renting these films. So there's loads and loads of films from the 80s that everyone's seen that I've never seen. So I saw Dirty Dancing last week. I think I was in my 30s before I saw Top Gun. There's just loads of films like that everyone has seen, and they can't believe I haven't seen. I've never seen RoboCop. I've never seen the first Terminator film.
This is it. And someone pointed out to me, they were like, we had a client in, I thought this was genius, and they were like, no one puts baby in the corner. And the Dirty Dancing poster, it's in the corner. I was like, that's a good joke. That is well observed, isn't it?
Yeah. See, when I've seen these episodes, I was saying before, these podcast episodes, I thought these posters must have took them ages to put up, and now it's shattered the illusion.
Every
a
little
bit
thing,
now, thinking that it's wallpaper.
It is wallpaper, and they're all on the strips. How many posters do you think we've got up around here? Like, if you could take a guess. He's not going to get it right. We might.
500.
Ooh, you know what? Not bad. 450.
That's not bad.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
We've had everything from like 1,000 to like from 100. And I was like, there can't obviously be 1,000 pictures in here, and certainly there's more than 100. But yeah, it's quite a good fun room. We do enjoy doing our podcasts in here. So, but yeah, no, thank you so much for coming along today and just
thank you for having me.
You know, sharing your experiences on, you know, writing and copy. And I think it's, you know, it's such an important area, and particularly, you know, for video, creating great video, because even if you take the complete visual element out of it and you've got the audio, you know, that's the story in itself, isn't it? So you've always got to have a strong script and a strong copy, you know, if you're creating great content, because it can't work without the other, right?
Yeah, I would think so. I think if you've got decent copy and weak images, it dilutes it, and I think the reverse is massively true as well. So yeah, when they're both working well together, I think that's when you get the best results.